I didn't start going off quite right because I'm new, so I'm going to start again. I want to just start by welcoming you to this webinar today. We're very excited to have a panel that has so much knowledge and expertise to bring to it. My name is Craig. I'm the scientific director of PrevNet, standing for Promoting Relationships and Eliminating Violence Network. This is one of the seminars that we have in our series. And today's topic is really to look and think about, to put on our programs online or not. We put together an amazing panel that has people who have made decisions to put their programs online that address teen dating violence and healthy relationships, and people who have made a decision not to. Both of these are, and I think what the real critical piece here is what works for you and what context do you deliver. So we're here to just provide some information from some well-known experts and programmers in the field that can share their thoughts and their reasons behind it. Before I go to introduce the panel, I'd just like everyone to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples whose lands they're sitting on. We all are from various parts of the country and are sitting on the territories of Indigenous people. I personally am grateful to be sitting on the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe lands, and grateful because I find that, especially during COVID, it is a true pleasure to be able to use the land and get out and explore the land. So please take a moment to acknowledge where you are and the people who have so generously taken care of the lands. I'm going to hand this over to the fabulous speakers while I try and solve my problem, and I might have to switch to my phone. So I'm going to just start by letting you know the format is that we have a great panel of speakers. They're each going to speak to 5 to 10 minutes. Then we're going to move on to the next speaker. And if you have questions, put in the chat, and we'll moderate them at the end of the chat. I'm going to start by asking Amy Foreman from the YWCA to speak. And thanks for joining us today, Amy.
All right, I hope everyone can see my screen. I think I've done that correctly. So hi everyone, as mentioned by Wendy, thank you. My name's Amy Foreman. I'm the Dating Violence Prevention Program Coordinator at YWCA Metro Vancouver, and we run the Dating Safe program for grade 8, grade 9, and grade 10 students at 2 schools in the Lower Mainland. So let's just see if I can change my slide here. Oh, great. So firstly, I just want to mention that the YWCA Metro Vancouver is honored and privileged to operate on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, so the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam nations, as well as the Semiahmoo, Kaikite, Stolo, Kwantlen, Katzie, Coquitlam, and Tsawwassen First Nations. Secondly, Wendy kind of mentioned this, but I just want to acknowledge that I'm sharing, our approach to switching to online programming. But I do realize and want to acknowledge that YWCA does hold a lot of privilege as a larger nonprofit in BC. And we do have a lot of, resources to lean on, especially in this situation. So definitely not here to say what's right or what's wrong, but just what worked best for our program, for the students we work with, and also just in line with the parameters that were set for us by the schools that we work with. So definitely coming into this conversation, knowing that as a community of practice, we all made, hard decisions, but the best decisions based on our, unique programs and the populations that we work with. So I just wanted to kind of start there. By no means is this the kind of right way to go. It's just what worked with that for us. Okay, so just quickly what our program looks like. So online programming, we often think live sessions or live videos. We actually chose a slightly different approach and are doing pre-recorded videos for students. So essentially students receive a video for each module. So in grade 8, they receive 8 modules that are all in video form, pre-recorded by our facilitator, and they receive a workbook that has a lot of content in it and some reflection questions that they submit using Microsoft Forms, which we receive, and also the teachers. This gives us a really good idea of who's completing the assignments, and then we get some information back from the students in terms of how engaged they are with the content. Because we work with 2 schools, we have 2 very different delivery methods as well. So We have some students doing remote learning, and so they receive their videos and they kind of do the work independently. There is a teacher online for support during that time, but essentially the idea is they get the video, they go through the workbook, they answer the questions. At our other school, they've taken a very different approach, and they actually are doing all in-class learning. But due to parameters around COVID, we're not actually able to enter the school at this time. That could change. So, we're kind of prepared for anything. But at this point, the teachers play the video in class during instructional time. And the teacher, based on kind of their level of engagement with the content, are able to kind of prompt students in discussions, or the workbook and the questions are kind of there for them to kind of just run it solely through the video. And then our focus groups and evaluations are all done online right now as well. Okay, so let's, so why we're offering online programming. So of course, this is kind of the bulk. So the first part being, our commitment to our school partners. So, we have agreements with the districts and our school partners to deliver the Dating Safe program over the next 4 years. And so this was kind of a larger motivating factor for us, that we wanted to continue delivering the program in any kind of way we could, despite COVID-19. So that was kind of one point that pushed us to move online. The second piece was ethics and evaluation. So we saw this as a really interesting opportunity to evaluate the impacts of online programming versus in-person programming. What are some of the difference? How our evaluation looks a little different based on students who received the in-person program last school year and the online program this year. And it wasn't something we had originally built into our evaluation. So we saw this as kind of an interesting way to look at some of those results, given that so much of our world has moved online. The second piece of the evaluation that we considered was we see the same students for 3 years consecutively. So we see them in grade 8 for eight modules, grade 9 for 2 booster modules, and then in grade 10. And so skipping out an entire year really does kind of throw a wrench in our, plan to look at how they're responding to the content and any kind of shifts in attitude or behavior over a 3-year period. So that was another big kind of motivating factor for us. The third piece was our program facilitator. So we have one full-time facilitator for Dating Safe. So by moving online, we're able to continue to have them working on building content online, but also adjusting our curriculum to potentially be running schools in a very different way, obviously, because of parameters around COVID-19. The fourth piece here is sustainability. So, all of us are, there's an end date to our funding. So looking at sustainability is extremely important. And we've kind of been grappling with some of the issues around ensuring the sustainability and longevity of the program. And so we saw this as a really interesting way to kind of add an additional layer to our in-person curriculum by offering videos as well. So when the funding period is ended and we hand this curriculum over, we now have videos to accompany each module, which we think will be a really good value to the school districts who, plan hopefully to continue to deliver Dating Safe once we kind of leave the schools. The last piece here, supporting youth. I feel like this goes without saying, but of course we wanted to, hopefully create a space that youth could start to reflect a little bit on the importance of relationships, especially right now when relationships may be a little bit more strained because of COVID-19, and also just a very chaotic time. So we are thinking about ways in which youth are impacted by COVID-19 and really try to develop strategies to support them in the videos, which I'll kind of talk about a little bit later. Okay, so the last piece here, so what were some of our implementation considerations? So I kind of pose this as 4 main questions. Obviously, there were a lot more factors that kind of went into this, but these were the 4 that kind of stood out for us as a team. So barriers to accessing technology was a huge piece. We were hearing a lot of this last school year. So by creating pre-recorded videos that had the workbook and the reflection questions, it meant that students could watch the videos at any time. So it added a layer of flexibility for young people if they were sharing tech at home and couldn't necessarily sit down during a 45-minute period in the middle of the day. So that flexibility was really important. It also helped us reach both schools at the same time, as they have very different schedules. And also, if students weren't able to watch the video, we've made the questions and the workbook kind of stand alone. So if for whatever reason they weren't able to watch a longer video, they could just review the workbook and the content given and answer the questions. So they still were able to engage in the content in some way. Obviously, as the districts kind of moved and knew that this fall things were going to be online, they have done a good job of making sure students are set up with technology. But of course, we still wanted to consider that that's not going to be, you know, a perfect scenario all the time. The second question that we kind of posed was, how can we ensure that, you know, we're not burdening our educators that we work with? So by creating the pre-recorded videos, our facilitator is kind of able to guide the entire session without a lot of support from the educators, which is great. So depending on their comfort level with the material, and again, our commitment to kind of deliver this as part of their curricular requirements, we're able to kind of guide the whole session, which is great. The third piece, so creating engaging and interactive videos that are pre-recorded is quite challenging, and I would say is kind of the hardest piece with choosing this approach. Obviously with live, you have a lot more opportunities to engage with the young people. Obviously this had to do with ethical considerations as well and district rules around doing live sessions. So again, the pre-recorded videos, in terms of making them interactive, our facilitator is number one, incredible. So the videos do have a lot of opportunities for grounding exercises, moments to kind of pause and reflect on the content that was shared, and discussion questions for students. And then of course, the questions that they're submitting to us and their teacher at the end of each video. The last piece, so obviously moving online required a lot of work when it came to ethics. So we go through PHAC REB, but also we have 2 school districts that we work with in terms of ethics. So making this decision, we had to consider all of the kind of ethical pieces that needed to go forward, and working through all the proper channels. So I see Wendy's just popped on, so I'm probably at my time. I'm actually done. That was my last point. So yeah, thank you so much. On my last slide, I just have my email listed here. So if you did have any questions or wanted to connect with me directly, my email's there and you can definitely reach out. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy. I'm going to take my video off just because I'm having the internet instability problems in my home. But I really appreciate that. And for those of you who didn't notice, you can get the slides. There's a link in the chat for everybody, so you'll have that contact. I'd like to now turn it over to McKenna from the Boys and Girls Club.
Awesome. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, Amy, for kicking us off. I wanted to just start by telling you a little bit. So my name is McKenna. I'm the Manager of National Programs with Boys and Girls Clubs of Canada. And the program that I'm speaking with you today about is our Respect to Connect program, which focuses on positive strengths-based relationships and trauma-informed perspectives. So we have 8 clubs that are currently running the program. And these are individual clubs from across the country. So the West, the East, and Central regions. Also, the age ranges for our participants are between 13 to 15, and the process of our program itself is a 12-week structured program. So it's very specific to the way that it has a specific start and an end with the same individual groups. Now, some of the pieces that we were looking at when considering how to run Respect to Connect, and I think to preface it, I wanted to share that each of the 8 clubs are running it very differently. So some clubs are running in person, some clubs are running online, and some clubs are running it in a hybrid model. So I wanted to sort of walk through some of the nuances between each. And as we were looking at some of the clubs running it in person, they noticed some challenges around having smaller groups and the potential that their spaces could close at any point in time based on COVID restrictions. Also, if one person in that space is affected, the entire group closes down essentially. However, we also talked about some benefits in terms of being that it's in person, confidential conversations are a lot easier. It's easier to build rapport in that way. And we also have built into the curriculum engaging with Indigenous communities. So one of our clubs are actually working with an Indigenous elder and being able to run the program that way, which is a lot easier in person than it is virtually for this specific group. And when we were thinking about doing it virtually, and again, some clubs are doing it virtual as well, there came up the concern in relation to the challenges around having a safe environment, being able to ensure that the youth are supported if they do get triggered in a moment of conversation with the group, how that can happen. We talked a bit about breakout rooms, we talked a bit about opportunities that way, but once the group ends, the individual doesn't have that extra time that they would had they been in person. Sometimes also virtual sessions can create for an individual to get their focus shifted and divided if they're on their email or they're on chats or doing something else. And the other piece we talked about in terms of the challenging pieces are the sensitivity of the information that's shared. So as the clubs are looking at running it, the swag that we had offered to each of the clubs for their members included headphones. So participants were encouraged to have headphones as they participated to keep their information confidential, but to also ensure that the information that their participants or the people in their group are talking about also remained confidential. A challenge that came up, which we were lucky enough to get some additional funding for through a corporate funder, was to get some Chromebooks. So these were to alleviate the technology barriers that often are faced when it comes to, and even the pieces that Amy was talking about previously, some of those technology gaps. So being able to offer that to members that they can keep it after completing Respect to Connect. The other piece we talked about was the differences between promotion virtually and in person. So for virtual promotion, some of our clubs have been doing some really creative things. They've done social media teasers where they did some pre-recorded activities and they loaded that onto their social media pages to encourage people to participate and to join up to the Respect to Connect group. Others have created memes. The youth themselves had created memes around Respect to Connect and around healthy relationships to encourage people to participate in the way that it's easier to get that connection with youth. One piece that we've noticed in both aspects, but can be a bit more challenging virtually, is that confidentiality and consent piece. Being able to maintain consent in person is often a lot easier than it would be online. Sometimes parents or guardians are walking around. The information may not present certain ways in that capacity as well. So another aspect that we were looking at, some clubs are doing it this way also, is a hybrid model. So they're rotating between in-person one week and virtual the next week. And that is the way that their club is positioned. So it's easier for the youth to be able to participate in that capacity, to know that they're in club this time and they're out of club that time. And that's generally how all of the other club programs are running for that space. It allows to support that space requirement in terms of the amount of people that can be in the club and doubles and maximizes that capacity. The piece that gets challenging for this as well as in person is that due to changing COVID restrictions, it can make it really challenging to do it only in person, but with a hybrid model, it allows for the flexibility for that to be shifted back and forth. One challenge is that sometimes it can be easier for youth to drop off of a program that is in such a hybrid model because they may not remember which one is in which way at which time. And again, some of the challenges is that closures due to COVID may restrict running the program in partner spaces. So schools, community centers, if the spaces are closed, then it makes it challenging. One of our clubs is actually partnering with the local school who's running it virtually, and they've secured a time within the healthy education, the phys ed time slot to be able to run Respect to Connect at that time. So what are boys and girls clubs doing? Really, there's a variation based on the provincial requirements. And some clubs are running Respect to Connect twice a week. Some clubs are running, because of the uncertainty of COVID, they've decided to sort of heavy load it right now, doing it twice weekly. Others have decided to run the program for 2 hours as opposed to 45 minutes and allow for breaks. also to be able to create the space where a therapist can be present and an Indigenous elder can be present. So those are some aspects in terms of being able to shift the model and the way that the program is running. And some pieces that individuals have concerns with in person and in virtual have been able to sort of offer this hybrid model or this more intense model. Some of the key issues that helped in terms of the decision making for the clubs is really that aspect of the consistency in terms of supporting their youth and supporting the kids. Yes, our evaluation is and has been changing and tweaking. Definitely conversations with ethics have been had and are continuing to be had, but it's also ensuring that as we're continuing to do this work, we're not putting it into a one size fit all, and we're able to adapt it accordingly. I apologize. The other piece that we're looking at is that we're ensuring that we're hearing from the youth, we're getting youth feedback and youth input as we're moving forward to ensure that the program is on various spaces. So we were talking about implementing the program on an online platform, and club staff have had conversations about, do we run it on Zoom? Do we use Google Classroom? Do we use Snapchat? And clubs have run it in all three capacities with the youth, with the preface that going to the youth where they're at and connecting with them in the spaces that they're aware of and that they're familiar with. The other piece around access to technology is the piece around the Chromebook additional funding that we've gotten, being able to support in that capacity, being able through public health, being able to offer swag that has not only headphones, but has webcam protectors for individuals to assure their safety and their confidentiality in that capacity as well. And then ensuring that we're able to continue having fluid conversations with the youth on an ongoing basis. Now, some of the clubs have decided to do this hybrid model because they're easing into whatever the transition for the future COVID could look like, and being able to have spaces that are open and being able to have those conversations as well. The other pieces that clubs are doing is some clubs are able to send take-home packages. So pieces that are kits that include activities that youth can participate in when they're running the program. So that's an additional club expense that goes into it. They're able to deliver it or drop it off to say, this week we're working on this activity and that week we're working on that, and here are the resources for it specifically. See Wendy popping in, and that is my last slide also. So my contact information is there. Feel free to reach out and ask any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. We really appreciate those thoughts. And now I'm going to turn to the next group, which is Rachel McLean and Rosalind Carter from the Canadian Public Health Association.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. My name is Rachel, and I work with the Canadian Public Health Association. And we are located in Ottawa on original unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And I'm going to be presenting today with Rosaline from the Center for Sexuality. Our project is a joint initiative between the Center for Sexuality and the Canadian Public Health Association. So just quickly, our project really focuses on adapting the Center for Sexuality's existing comprehensive relationship and sexual health education program, and then working with other community partners to support their delivery and evaluation of the program in their own communities. And so last year, we launched a call for proposals for organizations that were interested in working with us to deliver and evaluate the program in their own communities. And through that process, we identified 4 organizations. So there were 2 organizations in Ontario, 1 in Manitoba, and 1 in Yukon that we'll be working with over the next several years to deliver and evaluate our relationship and sexual health education program, or RSE program. So Like many of you, I'm sure, last spring, we spent a lot of time thinking through, whether or not we should move the program online and thinking about the pros and cons of moving online. And I will say we were quite fortunate in that in our work plan, we had never really intended to begin working with our partner organizations until the fall of this year. So we weren't scrambling last spring to adapt to some of the public health regulations that COVID brought on. We really had the spring and the summer to really think about our different options and come up with a plan that worked for our partner organizations. So in order to come to a decision, I would say there are two main sort of deciding factors, one being the sort of expertise and experience of our partner organization, the Center for Sexuality. They actually delivered the relationship and sexual health education program last spring to youth in Calgary and the surrounding communities. And so we really leaned on some of the lessons they learned through that process. And Rosaline's going to speak about sort of in particular why the RSE program is amenable to online learning and sort of some of the nuances of online learning and what led us to make that decision. The other big deciding factor for us was our community partners. As I mentioned, CPHA and Center for Sexuality are not actually delivering and evaluating the program ourselves. We're working with other organizations to support their delivery of the program. So the decision really came down to our community partners. And so in order to get a sense of what was going on in their communities and in their organizations, we had calls with each of them throughout the summer, just to really chat through, what was COVID-19, what changes were happening as a result of COVID-19 in their organizations. And we also sent out an anonymous online survey where all of our partners could identify potential concerns related to online facilitation of the program. And so I think in our project, we've been really, I can't say that enough, fortunate in terms of our community partners. We heard from them sort of, that they were very eager to go forward with the project and that many of them in many different ways were already beginning to pivot online in terms of their own programming and services. And so they were certainly sort of open to potentially delivering the RSE program online. So we made the decision to, as I said, move our RSE program online. We did make a few changes to our work plan though. We had originally planned to offer training for our community partners this fall. We did decide to move the training online, and we also delayed the date until January of next year. And that was really based on some of the experiences of Center for Sexuality, and really just to give the school boards and the community-based settings in our various partner communities time to sort of readjust to the changing context in terms of how youth were learning, whether that was sort of in school or a blended model or primarily virtually. We'll also be offering 3 delivery formats for the 2020-2021 school year. And I think this is very similar to what McKenna shared. Some of our partner organizations may go forward with in-person facilitation where they are able to go into the school and deliver the program or go into community-based agencies and deliver the program. The other delivery format is online facilitation where students are participating in person, but the facilitator is joining virtually. And then the last delivery format, complete online, where students are joining virtually as well as the facilitator. And then the last change we made is when we originally began this project, we sort of stipulated that community partners should deliver the program in at least one school setting as well as one community-based setting, whether that was a community health center or a youth services bureau, et cetera. But given some of the changes that arose as a result of COVID-19, we're trying to be a little bit more flexible in that groups can now deliver the RSE program in at least 2 sites. So whether that's school settings or community settings or a combination thereof. So I think overall, we're trying to be very flexible, but also maintain some fidelity of the program so that we can evaluate the RSE program as an intervention for youth dating violence. So with that, I'll hand it over to Rosaline just to talk about some of the nuances of online learning for our particular program.
Thanks, Rachel. I also just want to recognize that the Center for Sexuality is on the Treaty 7 territory in Southern Alberta and is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta. Organizationally, we're very thankful for them taking such good care of this land so that we may enjoy the abundance that we do here. I also just want to recognize that organizationally, to go online or not has been a program-based decision. So right after me, you're going to hear from Maria talking about one of our programs called Wise Guys, and we made the opposite decision in this case. And so I do want to just let folks know we have made the decision on a case-by-case, program-by-program basis based on some of our learnings from our spring pilots when we were sort of forced into online learning. I also want to recognize that we are not experts in this. We are figuring it out as with the rest of folks, and our decisions are sort of constantly changing based on the feedback we're getting from the students that we work with, as well as our evaluation data, and that if not for the support of very flexible funders, we wouldn't be able to test and try in the way that we are. So also just an immense gratitude for people's openness around our learning. So Rachel talked about our RSE program, which has been operating in schools in the Calgary area since 1975. Schools have been our primary partner for the delivery of that program. Generally, the program runs in grade 7, 8, 9, and then in comm class in high school, so usually grade 10 and 11s. Each grade a commitment is asked that the students participate in 4 sessions over the course of the week. And so we chose to do RSE online because it is a shorter term commitment for the students. 4 sessions are already part of their school day in which we can deliver the program to them. We're asking for teachers for a lot less commitment, I guess, in order to set it up, in order to help us manage not being in the school. We really took the lead when we made this decision from our school divisions. Some put out policies fairly early in August saying they were not allowing guests into the school, and some didn't create those policies. So we sort of made the decision before some of those policies came out that we just didn't want to be an extra burden on folks who are trying to run a million other things in terms of COVID protocols. So we also really had success with running our RSE program online in May and June when we tried to do the virtual. People were engaged. We were able to run many of the same activities online. So in terms of the sort of applicability and ability to translate our in-person program to online, we had great success doing that. To dig in a little bit more to what Rachel said, our current model is a couple of different delivery models. So in most cases, teachers have opted that the program that they want online is that students are in their class with their own laptops, sitting together, and we sign everybody into Zoom or into Google Meets to have everybody participate so that our facilitator can see all of their faces. They can all participate using their own microphones. They can use their own chat feature. Some teachers have chosen to go an opposite route, which is to have one screen set up at the front of the room with a teacher setting up microphone and one camera. It's way trickier, as I'll talk about in a little bit, but it is, I think, for some people, again, that we've said it over and over again, there's lots of technology barriers. So for some schools, it's not an option. Students don't have their own laptops. So we've made programs that kind of fit both of those, as well as we have worked with the school divisions in Calgary who are doing online virtual learning to have students be able to connect at home. So those are the 3 sort of models online that we're offering. Do you mind switching for me, Rachel? Thank you. Some of the considerations that we had going into this and some of the things we're learning is actually engagement has been super high. The chat box is a very popular feature amongst the young people that we work with. We're getting a lot of really good question and engagement through the chat box. We're seeing students really who may not have participated in a classroom environment participating and really sending positive messages saying it's a great opportunity for them to engage in ways that they normally wouldn't. Like I said, the model we're preferring is the individual computers so that facilitators can read body language and hear students as opposed to sort of the wide camera at the front of the room where you don't really know how engaged folks are. Obviously thinking about things like internet connection. So we've had to make some allowances to having staff work in the office if they're at homes and in apartments where lots of people are using the internet, then we allow them to work here. We have had to provide way more time to let facilitators spend more time creating engaging PowerPoints and online learning activities. And then when individual computers aren't an option, we have to set really clear expectations of the technology requirements for the teachers. So we have a bit of a checklist that we send around what's required for them to have us come into their classrooms virtually. So I'm talking really fast because I got the 1-minute warning. And then teachers have to be given clear expectations of what facilitators need for classroom management when we're not in the room to do that. And organizationally, we have a very different view of what classroom management looks like than I think many sort of traditional teaching environments do. So it's really important for us that we're not shutting down comments and things like that. So we do have to provide some extra support to teachers to do that for us when we're not in the room. And considerations quickly. So the support, oh, this is you, Rachel. You do it, you go.
All right, so just really quickly, I think in terms of now scaling Center for Sexuality's RSE program to other communities by working with our community partners, we've been thinking a lot amongst our two organizations how to actually support these groups. And so some of the things we're considering is that our training that we're offering in January will focus on some of the tips and strategies for both in-person as well as online facilitation, because our groups may be delivering the program in different ways. We'll also be offering pre-recorded videos of some Center for Sexuality educators actually delivering the program so that they can use that to become sort of more comfortable with some of the nuances of online delivery. We are going forward with a co-facilitation model where a staff person from one of our organizations, hi Wendy, I'll wrap up very quickly, will be helping with co-facilitation, and that's really just to help with some of the technology aspects of co-facilitation, but also if someone gets triggered, to help with safety, and then thinking about a support package for our collaborators to help them engage with the school boards and community agencies in their organizations. And from an evaluation standpoint, we are keeping all of the evaluations the same, other than the fact that, of course, they will be offered online for groups that are participating in the program online, and we will be asking youth to identify how they participate in the program, and we hope to be able to compare some of the learning outcomes across the different delivery formats. And of course, we'll be reaching out to our partners throughout the project and kind of getting a sense from them how online delivery impacted their overall experience. So, we're really hopeful, but of course, I think moving forward, there are a lot of challenges that we anticipate we'll encounter as our groups begin delivering the program. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you both. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Rosalind. Next, we have Maria Saona from the Center for Sexuality, and she's going to talk about a different program, as indicated. So over to you.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. My name is Maria Sayona, and I'm the manager of the Wise Guys Program Center for Sexuality. I'm here to talk to you about how we transition the program from in-person to online in the spring, and then our decisions for the current school year. As Rosalind mentioned, Center for Sexuality, it's in Treaty 7, so we're thankful to Treaty 7 people so that we can enjoy such abundance. Quickly about the Center for Sexuality, our mission is that we teach, we train, we advocate to support healthy bodies, healthy relationships, and healthy communities. And our vision is that we have sexual well-being for all. We have a different number of services and programs to support folks across the lifespan in terms of their sexuality, sexual health, relationships, which I'm not going to have a chance to talk about today, but if you're interested in learning more about the work that we do, I invite you to go to our website, so centerforsexuality.ca. In terms of Wise Guys, the structure of the program is that we deliver the program in about 80 minutes per session. We do the program on a weekly basis, both in community sites as well as in school selected locations. We do that throughout the year, the school year, and of course with community programs, we do make adaptations based on the time frame that they have with their clients so that we can have an opportunity to get through the entire curriculum during the time that they are with them. Our curriculum is divided in 4 modules. Healthy relationships is one, sexual health, the second module, and then third, gender, sexuality, and media, and our last one, human rights and leadership. People who join the program, which is mainly adolescent boys between the ages of 13 to 16, in community, we do make the exception to go a little bit higher in terms of the age range to about 18 years old. Some of the outcomes of the program is that folks that participate would increase comfort expressing emotion, less homophobic attitudes, increased confidence with sexual health, increased disagreements with conventional and unhelpful masculinities, increase comfort connecting with others, feel better, able to engage in healthy relationships. So in terms of what happened when we decided to pilot Wise Guys online, we have a bit of a summary here. As soon as COVID hit, we were in a position where we had to adapt and look for ways to adapt the curriculum to an online setting, understanding that participants were now at home. So we, at that point, facilitators had come to about half of the curriculum and they had about 2 modules to go. And so we looked at ways of adapting the remainder of the curriculum to an online setting. We used mostly Zoom for that, and we had a blended kind of approach with asynchronous and synchronous learning. We also looked at ways of gamifying activities. We used things like Kahoot, breakout rooms, the chat. We also did engage the youth in some memes. Part of the program is that we do a check-in, but considering that potentially participants were going through some mental health issues, not being able to go to school and seeing their friends, we extended the check-in time. Also, we recognized that the hour that we had with them online was very much like half an hour, 40 minutes total in terms of participation, because again, we had to manage some of the technology issues. We had some late arrivals, which I'm going to talk about challenges in a minute. So we also realized that having some sort of stay-home activities to supplement the content that we were discussing in program was actually helpful. And so we would go over the content of that week, and then we will provide a few options for the youth to engage outside of program. And that way they could come back and report on what they learned while they were working through those activities. Also, something that we included as part of those adaptations for online was a list of community resources. We worked with youth in Calgary and surrounding areas, and most of our in-school partners are in rural areas. And so it will be important we thought it was important for us to come up with a list of community resources in those areas, like the Crisis Center, Kids Help, as an example. Some of the advantages that we found during that time, of course, was the staff's capacity development. Everyone had to learn how to use online platforms to facilitate program. So everyone was in that stretching zone, which was really helpful. And now looking back and learning new skills, as well, scheduling flexibility was a plus. We had the opportunity to really look at not only this 1 hour during school that partners were giving to us to facilitate program, but potentially look at times and dates that will work best for the participants now being at home. Also, we noticed a higher participation from those participants that were usually shy in in-person programs. And so having the option of chats and breakout rooms, smaller groups, that gave them the opportunity to participate more, which we were really excited about. And then the last advantage, I would say, was the piece around co-facilitation. Usually in in-person programming, we would have one facilitator to facilitate one program. But due to having to test and learn a new technology, we decided to have a second person to kind of help the main facilitator with technology, make sure that we were not missing any comments in the chat. If there was anything around classroom management, we were paying attention to those pieces. And then in terms of challenges, we encountered a few. The first one was around communication with partners, parents, and youth, the participants themselves. Before COVID, we would rely mainly on our partners to communicate with participants, because we already had a scheduled hour in schools to do that. Now having to run program online, I needed to have access to the participants' email addresses, which we did not have prior. We had to rely again to our school and community partners to reach out to participants and make sure they had the Zoom invites to join the meetings and things like that. So that resulted in a low registration for the online program. And then participation from that point on was not always great. So about out of the about 280 participants that we had total before COVID, around 86 signed up for online, and about 40% of those participants actually attended regularly, and 30% actually completed the program. And so we realized that there were a lot of efforts around communication that prevented us from reaching the majority of the participants. So we also noticed a lot of change in group dynamics. Wise Guys is a participatory program. We rely a lot on the conversations and discussions that happen with participants, and the facilitator is there to guide those discussions. We noticed that participants were quite distracted using online. Not everyone was using the video, although we had said that was the preference for the program. We realized that those were some of the issues that we're encountering there. Also, Zoom and virtual fatigue, because they had to do a lot of online learning already. Coming to Wise Guys and having to do that online was also an issue, as Wise Guys being in some ways escape for participants to actually come and get some sort of a break from their day-to-day lives and be with their peers and participate and talk about other kinds of issues. Curriculum fidelity was also a struggle, although we tried really hard to adapt our curriculum to an online setting and be able to accomplish most of those core activities that would help us meet our outcomes. We realized that because, again, all those late arrivals, participants forgetting to that they have programmed that day, that we had to do a lot of repeats the following session. And then I saw Wendy, yes, thank you. And then safety was a big one as well, having to be at home and not having the opportunity to have that safe space was also an issue for them to participate. The last thing I would say is that because of those issues that we encountered, we decided this year to not offer, as Rosalind mentioned, Wise Guys online. So we're going to be concentrating all of our resources to do programming in community, in person, and that will be out of school hours with a blend of after school hours, PD days, weekends. And so those are things that we're not right now in the midst of trying to confirm logistics about that. So I talked a ton about this. I know I'm running out of time. And if you have any questions about Wise Guys, please feel free to connect with either Rosalind or myself. Here's our contact information. And thank you all very much for your time today.
Great. Thanks so much, Maria. We really appreciate it. Sorry to rush you at the end, but we have so many great speakers. I'm now going to turn it over to Charlene Sen from the University of Windsor. So over to you.
Sorry about that. After all that practice, I went and messed it up. There we go. All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry, there's my video. So we are also in a position where we made the decision not to flip the script, our program for girls online. And so I'm going to talk to you a bit about that. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge that the University of Windsor, where we are, both Sarah and I are originated, is on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. This project for FAC is actually an adaptation of a program that was designed for young women in university down to girls ages 14 to 17. And so I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the program just very briefly, as others have done. The program as it's designed is 4 3-hour sessions, and they're named up here. It's usually presented in 2 weekend days or 4 weeknights, so 3 hours per time. And it's facilitated in small groups by the expert peers. The program will be offered in communities or in high schools, but not in class time. So recruitment is occurring sometimes through high schools. This is a manualized program. It is completely structured, as some of the programs are and others are not. It's very interactive. It has very brief didactic sessions where we're actually presenting information with lots of activities, including applications using scenarios, videos, audio recordings, and there is also physical self-defense instruction. And as you can see, it's for girls only, self-identified girls. So our main reasons to consider moving online would have been, we did consider it very seriously, was that this program, after 10 years of development and evaluation, has been shown to be effective. And in that, I mean, it actually reduces sexual victimization. And so for every 13 young women who take it, presuming that the girls program is as effective, there's 1 fewer attempted or completed rapes being experienced within 1 year. And so this is a very big, in addition to the attitude changes and knowledge changes. And so that's a really big reason to consider not delaying. However, we had begun before COVID to see if we could adapt the university program for online delivery. And we will eventually have a program to test for university women first. But that process is not easy or straightforward, as you're getting the sense from other people as well. This was right away clear and through all of our development work. And this strengthened our resolve not to go online. So this one very important reason was actually contradicted by multiple reasons why not in this particular time frame. And we presume that this will be supported by all of our partners, given how busy they are. We've just made the decision. We've delayed. We were supposed to start with the full evaluation in September or October. Put it off to February, March, and now we're making the decision to put it off, obviously, till probably July. The partners are incredibly busy and overtaxed, and so our sense is that they will support this for all the reasons I'm going to be talking to you about. So I'm going to give you our main reasons, not our only reasons, for not moving online. The first is that as researchers, when we look at all of the evaluations that have been done on sexual violence interventions, almost all of them that have been online have been ineffective. And so starting from that place, that's an initial obstacle. The other thing, another thing is that this specific in-person small group facilitated format was, was designed based on the evidence of what we knew worked already, best practices from practitioners, educators, sexual assault centers, and so on, and social psychological and other theories to be effective in this in-person context. It is in a very engaging program in person. It has to be, given how long it is. And we were not at all confident that we could quickly transition. We are 2 researchers. Even with all of the resources of the university, we only have a small nonprofit supporting the actual changes to the program. And so this just didn't seem like we could probably do a good job in a short period of time. But even more than that, because we did have some of the work done already, we began to realize more and more that the creation of this group environment between girls, this in-person group, and between the girls and the young women who are facilitating, we believe it to be key to how the content is taken on board for individuals and how it builds their confidence, so empowerment, but also empowerment as a group, identification with that sense of community. And while some of that, for sure, there are online communities, and we know that's possible, some of this the kind of empowerment we're talking about is uniquely physical for this sexual assault resistance program, which is about things like seeing other women who are your size, for example, whether you are a larger body woman or a very, very small woman, doing the kinds of engaging in these activities, seeing that shy women can participate and can build their confidence, as well as really outgoing women, and seeing that physically, we believe is part of how the program works. And so we think it needs to be tested before it is put out in a full scale up or even further research. Other reasons, and they're listed 4 and 5, but actually they were our 1 and 2. And I'll talk a bit more about these, are what some of you have already alluded to in terms of safety and privacy for the participants. And I'm going to divide this just briefly into sort of for all of the girls or young women who are participating, and then specifically for survivors, who usually are at least 35% of the young women who take the program in university, and are likely also in our pilot testing with girls. So the first thing is that this program involves, even more so than general sort of knowledge-based programs, exploration of really difficult content and emotions, particularly around what are our own emotional barriers to acknowledging danger from people that we know and perhaps like and trust. And so those kinds of explorations, even more than just the general topic, requires trust and privacy. And it's very difficult to ensure that no one else is present in the rooms of the people who are participating, who's listening, and who might breach the group's confidentiality agreements, which are very, very important. Also, the physical instruction of the self-defense has physical safety requirements that might not be sort of immediately obvious, or maybe may for those of you. So for example, we need space for every young woman or girl to be able to extend her arms fully and twirl, or just sort of have the full radius of her limbs for the self-defense instruction, which is 1 unit. That is quite hard to accomplish in homes, in bedrooms, or shared spaces without having obstacles, except for the most privileged girls. And so that is a problem. There's also constant safety monitoring for those to make sure that this is safe. And that's very hard to accomplish or maintain virtually. There's another part of it that's about paired practice, which is an important element of that self-defense that obviously would not be possible with each individual girl in her home. But also we think the physical interaction with other girls. Oh, Wendy, am I already there? Oh my, okay, I will fly. All of these things in terms of survivors are even more. So the program works for survivors as well as girls who are not, because it is trauma-informed education. And it's very hard to read little tiny squares on a screen. So I really skipped through that very important part. I'm very sorry about that. So in the future, we're hoping through our research to be able to identify whether these kind of things can make this a safe and private location, and whether this could be also an effective. These are some of our ideas we're testing in the university program that we're going to be seeing. And some things, for example, the mailed physical resource kits would include personal safety kits, personal care kits, The issue of headphones, somebody else brought up. Our problem is we need Bluetooth if we're going to use headphones because of the physical activity and the danger of that. And so that is cost prohibitive. And so these are the kinds of things we're thinking about. And we welcome hearing all about the information from the other programs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Charlene, and sorry to rush you at the end because all of what you say is always very valuable and informative. I'm going to turn it over now to Claire Crooks from the University of Western.
All right, is that working? Wendy?
Yes, it's working.
Now, you know, I was teasing you about the tech stuff because I'm actually envious of your ease. All right, well, thank you. And thank you, PrevNet, for pulling this together. It's been so interesting to hear the process that other groups went through. And what really comes across to me is just the care and integrity that everybody approached this with. Like, there were no easy decisions, and our experience certainly parallels this. I'm going to talk about our decisions regarding the Healthy Relationships Project as part of our RISE-R. I'm the director of the Center for School Mental Health at Western, and we are located on territory that was traditionally the Attawandaron hunting grounds, beaver hunting grounds, and then later became a meeting place and was shared by the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenni Lenape people, all of whom still live in the area, in addition to obviously a robust urban population of Indigenous folks from all over. So I'm mindful we don't have tons of time left, and just going to try to highlight some of the things that we talked about. As a reminder, or for those of you not familiar with our program, it's a small group intervention with 16 hours of programming. In person, there's flexibility whether you want to do 16 one-hour sessions, or some people do it in 8, kind of 90 or 120 minutes, or weekends. And we don't typically directly implement the programming. It's implemented in community organizations, community mental health settings, child protection settings, juvenile justice, education and residential settings. And we support that through training, through helping to modify and adapt programming for particular settings, and ongoing consultation. And typically it's delivered by our partners. So when this all shook down kind of in April, and it started to become clear that that this wasn't going to be just a 2-week thing, there was this real tension between recognizing that vulnerable youth were in particular need of support and connection. And on one hand, on the other hand, can we move forward through those potential pitfalls and move forward in a good way? And I love the principles that Amy articulated in the first presentation. And I think that was a better description of some of those considerations around you're balancing your commitment to partners and sustainability, a chance to evaluate things online if this is our new normal, with also an awareness of the pitfalls. So we started to think about kind of 3 different spheres: technology, privacy, and ethical considerations, youth engagement, and clinical issues. So things like technical, we're like, what platform do you even use? And do youth have the required technology, as others have talked about? And in our case, it was actually kind of funny. We spent a lot of time doing due diligence and working through this really horrible process at the university of getting a technological risk assessment. And at the end of the day, it was actually irrelevant because our partners, for the most part, have pretty clear guidelines of what they are or aren't allowed to use. And it really depends on the partner's preference and rules, since they're the ones hosting the program. And even within one organization, there may be multiple platforms. So our local school board uses Teams for adults to meet, it uses Google Classrooms for kids, and it uses Brightspace for fully remote learning. So even knowing that there may be multiple things, youth engagement and clinical issues, as others have talked about, how do you create safe psychological safety and that sense of group without in-person connection? How do we support youth who need to step away? And then these spheres overlap for a reason. So you could have something like this: how do we respond when a youth disappears during a difficult conversation? and you don't really know what that means. It could be privacy related, that someone came into the room. It could be distress, and it could be tech related, that Zoom dropped them the way Zoom does. So how do we sort of sort that out and have something in plan? And I think our biggest lesson was that the more that you work through and these things, these issues and hypothetical situations up front and have something in mind, the more you can plan for it, which is what we did. And that plan can be a combination of technology, so having a breakout room that could count for someone to step away, but also kind of a approved plan with participants of how you would reach out if somebody's no longer in the session. Lots of great privacy and ethical considerations discussed. As McKenna noted, people can be coming in and out of the, McKenna noted, people can be coming in and out of the room. It might also change whose house you're at. If you're going between two different guardians' homes from one week to the next, that maybe you have a different living situation and degree of privacy and comfort at one than the other. In one case in our program, that's with a specific focus on identity for LGBTQ+ youth, one youth changed foster placements, and after that change, it was less safe for them to participate in the group. And that was just kind of how that went, which was obviously disappointing, but having to kind of recognize and honor that youth are going to be able to best make those decisions. And then some of these overlapping issues. So if a youth signs into the group on their phone while in a car with their social worker, then how do facilitators navigate that? You're balancing that youth engagement and commitment, and they've shown up, but they're in a car. Is the adult going to hear other people's private business? And those are some of the really practical issues that we have talked about beforehand, and that we faced in a number of the groups we've run. So I'm going to give a really quick example of how we worked through this with Children's Aid Society, which was our first group to go online. There was keen interest from their end, particularly because the group was already up and running and they wanted to maintain it. So we met with them for weeks. We didn't let ourselves get rushed, even though a group was already running, to work through these. We decided to restart the current group versus starting a new one. So the technology, as I said, was determined by the partner in this case. The youth engagement and clinical issues, we really had that increased upfront planning, both at the group and individual levels. And I love the way Charlene described that sort of safety and privacy assessment. So that's what we did. We spent more time with the youth ahead of time. We spent more time engaging other key adults and supportive adults, whether it's a therapist or a caseworker or parent, so that if there was a triggering incident or a significant distress, that there'd be somebody else that might be better able to support that youth. We talked to youth about the privacy that they had, about what we should do if we're worried about them, how we'd reach out, what's the best way to do that. We also added weekly individual check-ins for youth, and this was they'd meet with one of the facilitators, and it was optional. So not all youth did it, not all youth did it every week, but it was a chance to kind of process things. And in some cases, we saw this as a trauma-informed practice, but as a chance to preview even some of the content that was going to be coming up, knowing youth's particular circumstances. So for a youth who was experiencing a really coercive and difficult relationship and trying to extricate herself, when we start talking more about safety planning and dating violence, she was able to have some of those materials kind of previewed before the group and sort of know what was coming, and then be able to make that informed consent decision about participating and how to do that. Yeah, so privacy and ethics, we provided headsets. A lot of people have mentioned that, and it continues to be a challenge. And we've had things in other groups where it turns out that a sibling and a parent were in the room because they're also enjoying the content and feel like they're learning from the group, but again, not conducive to the kind of privacy and confidentiality that a group needs to function well. I think in terms of our lessons learned, so it wasn't a global program decision as much as a partner decision, and we continue to work through that sort of partner by partner. The importance of the upfront discussion and problem solving. I think everybody felt more comfortable going into this when we've done hours. Okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? And how would we handle this? And then people are sort of on the same page. We shifted some resources. So in our case, because I'm a university-based research center, we have a lot of grad students who've been trained in the program and who are not collecting data right now or doing things that they maybe more typically do as research assistants. So we were able to offer a co-facilitator. Wendy, I'm at 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I am watching. So we were able to offer a co-facilitator, which helps again with the tech pieces and helping debrief if somebody is upset. There's some new opportunities with this that maybe you get around some of the transportation issues, and youth who are going between homes or placements may be able to stay connected, but certainly lots of challenges, especially around fidelity. And as Rachel raised this issue, and it's been an ongoing discussion for us, it's that issue of what are the core elements, and then also this issue of dosage and what does that look like in an online environment. So it's a balance between being overly prescriptive and saying you have to do 16 hours because we don't actually know that, but also trying to think about when is the program no longer the program because it's morphed into something sort of unrecognizable online. We also have a community of practice for people facilitating it on right now because there has been, as Rosalie noted, that it takes a lot of time to come up with innovative games and things to do online. And so when lots of people are doing this, you run the risk of sort of divergent evolution that everybody's changing the program in their own way, which becomes a fidelity issue, but it's also an incredible source of strength if you have a spot for them to all be able to share those things and continue to improve. So very consistent with what other people found. It took a lot of planning at the beginning, and we continue to monitor and shift. And frankly, some of our groups that were running really well initially online, now with Zoom fatigue of youth in school, are having more challenge with attendance. So it's an ongoing process. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. Really appreciate the insights. I just want to say what a fabulous panel. Everybody did such a great job. Really great information and lots to consider. And it's about what works best for you and your context and your partners and your program. So really great ideas to put forward. Just want to give, I know it's getting close to the end of time, so I just want to give two administrative things. One, Stacy has put the link to the slides in the chat box, so feel free to download those. And second, there's going to be a link to an evaluation. And the evaluation, we really appreciate it. It helps us with our planning and it helps us improve what we're doing as we go along. And once you've completed the evaluation, you can get an automatic certificate of attendance generated, and those are separate. So during the course, we had 2 questions, so I just want to make sure that we have time, and I'm going to throw it out to the panel. Did anyone create a virtual care policy to address some of the issues that have been risen about confidentiality, supporting participants after the session is over? So does anybody have a virtual care policy? You're all not showing yourselves.
Wendy, we didn't develop a policy, but we did collect a number of documents from places, some in the US or from other jurisdictions, around guidelines. I don't know if any of them were a policy, but we have collected some guidelines if those are helpful. Yeah,
okay, thanks, Claire. We also thought that as a community of practice, we could help develop those. So that would be great if you wouldn't mind sharing those. Anyone else? The second question we had was, I'm curious about any early experiences with handling trauma-informed delivery / sensitivity while delivering online. Does anybody have had that experience and want to just share it?
I'd share one experience that because we were working with youth who have a lot of adversity at Children's Aid, one of our pre-planning things was making sure that we had really fast responsive referral pathways available if that became an issue, that we decided we weren't going to start this if somebody got really triggered or distressed, and our best option is to put them on a wait list for 6 months. And so in our case, we were really privileged that we have a university-based child and youth development clinic that offers the intervention and assessment and consultation. And I worked with the director of that clinic to make sure that that was an option with no wait, and in one case, the one youth from the CAS group did have just so much going on and really expressed a readiness, had been seeing a counselor, but then hadn't heard from them in months and months and months because of COVID. And we actually, she was able to start intervention the following week at the clinic. So, but even if we hadn't had the clinic, the CAS even agreed in principle that they would fund and find it if they needed to, because we thought that was so important. And then the other part was, again, just our individual meetings, I think were really helpful in sort of preventing or being able to check back in on some of the things that might have happened had we just gone strictly with the groups.
Great, thank you, Claire, for that. I note that we are at the end of our time. I want to first thank you for attending and hope that you learned and gained something from today. And I also just want to thank the presenters. Incredible presentations, could have given you each an hour, and I was sorry that I had to cut you short or rush you, but really all of you did a fabulous job, and we've all learned and gained something from the experience. So thanks for being with us today, and everybody stay safe. Take care. Bye.